Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Viking Central podcast. We have Tom here once again. He was here yesterday with our pod, gave great information. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on a few things today. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell had his presser yesterday. He looks like the man for the job, and obviously, it's easy to win a presser. Obviously, we don't know how his coaching is going to go and his tenure is going to go, but initially. Everything that he said yesterday, I think, was tremendous. Obviously he can talk very well in front of a crowd. He's a great communicator, collaborator. That's what they've been preaching, him and Kwesi. Collaborating, obviously, it wasn't that way with Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman. So, getting that breath of fresh air going. What was your initial thoughts watching that presser yesterday with Kevin O'Connell?
It was nothing but smiles. You kind of just felt the breath fresh of new air. He just screams leadership, a guy that players want to play for. And honestly, he's just the opposite of Mike Zimmer. It's typically what a lot of teams do. They hire the opposite of what they previously had. But this guy, he just checks all of the boxes. And I think he also answered every question from the media. Correctly. He kept his cards close to his chest in a way where he didn't want to reveal too much, where he's like, oh, yeah, he mentioned the Anthony Barr stuff, There's no way Anthony Barr's coming back. But stuff, so, is he lying? Is he telling the truth? You don't know. So, I don't know. Overall, I think he just really impressed. He screams leadership. And him and Kwesi seem to have, a very tight relationship. That they're going to be making decisions together. And so whether it's they like it or whether Kwesi wants something or O'Connell wants something, it won't be like Rick or Spielman where Rick just overrules him. It'll simply just be this is why I think we should do it. And Kwesi will probably get his analytic out, his whole whole analytics, according to this, this is why we should do this. And then Kevin will be like, you know what? All right, Kwesi. So they just seem like they just work well together. They're similar in age, and they have vision. That's all I kept hearing was vision and what they want this team to look like. And a quote that I really liked from O'Connell was simply just, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something about having coaches that can relate to players and that get along with players. And that was one that really stood out to me because Zimmer couldn't relate to the players. There was always a story coming out about Zimmer and kind of just treating a player as equals all the other ones, or that you're just a player. These guys, they want this to be a foundation. They want this to be a place where they could grow and start a family and end their career here, kind of thing. That's the goal for good organizations. Start your career here, end your career here, not just be a rental and say, oh, you're only here, you're a free agent for about a year. So I just had a lot of Sean McVay vibes, just his energy, his passion for the game. He just seems like a guy who just could talk football for hours on end.
Oh, for sure.
And he'll just pick your brain, and he just loved it. And probably my next the thing that stuck to me most was he was like, right after this, we're going right upstairs. We're going right upstairs. We're going to fill out this coaching staff, and we're going to get going. And it was just. He just screamed leadership, and it was just so nice to finally see that, because Vikings went from Zimmer, not that big of a leader. Then before Zimmer, there was Frazier, and Frazier was a leader, but he was quiet. He was a very quiet guy, where he necessarily didn't want to go all out and say, he's not going to go out and just really put it all out there. He'll kind of keep it to himself or say something to the media. And then you had Childress, where I was still a little younger, but he didn't come across as that big leadership guy. O'Connell was someone where his players are going to run through a brick wall for this guy.
For sure.
So, so far, it's a great hire. He seems like the right guy. I just think the biggest question going forward is his relationship with Kirk Cousins going to get in the way of potentially where this team should be heading long term? That's what him and Kwesi are going to have to figure out together. Because I don't know if you caught this when Thomason threw the whole, is Cousins going to be your quarterback in 2022? Can you confirm? He's like, well, he's under contract. You know, he answered it quick, like very like how you should, how agents tell you to handle it.
Yep.
Kwesi, on the other hand, he didn't seem very confident in his answer. I don't know if he's just like a bad liar or if he didn't want to reveal much, but he's like, yeah, you know, whatever Kevin wants to do. Like, so it just seemed like, I don't know me, I may be just looking too deep into this, but it seemed like Kevin's all in on sold on Kirk Cousins. Kwesi's like, we'll see what offers come our way, and then we'll just kind of thing. I don't know if you caught that in the presser, but that really stood out to me in the press conference. Like, Kwesi did not seem nearly as convinced on Kirk Cousins as O'Connell did.
No, I definitely noticed that, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Kevin O'Connell is open for Kirk and ready for Kirk to be the starting quarterback in 2022. I really believe that. Whereas Kwesi, he's got to look at it more of like a business aspect and, you know, the cap situation. And he's kind of worried about his job. He's got a 4-year contract. You really want to tie, you know, that whole, if they do extend Kirk, the whole contract to his tenure there as the Vikings GM. And I think even if we trade Kirk and look for the future for a quarterback, I think that honestly gives Kwesi more time. So say he gets a quarterback of the future and it takes 2-3 years and his contract's coming up. I think if it's still a work in the progress, he could get a second contract because they want to see what this quarterback of the future is going to look like. Whereas if he restructures Kirk and keeps him here for another 2-3 years and it just explodes in his face, he's gone. So I think he is more open to the possibility of moving Kirk or getting off of Kirk and looking to the future, where Kevin O'Connell's like, I think I can win with him now. I just got Matt Stafford a Super Bowl win. I see a lot of similarities with him with Kirk and Matt. So it's going to be interesting. You know, we've talked about collaboration. If they have two different mindsets on this, it's going to be their biggest decision yet. So it's really interesting to see which direction they decide to go.
Yeah, you know, and what I really noticed was how O'Connell went when describing Kirk Cousins. He said that Cousins and Stafford are very similar physically, not like,
mentally, right?
Not mentally having the intangibles. Because Stafford's a different breed, where it's like, you know, pressure's on. Stafford is all in. You know, he's the king of like game-winning drives, even when he was in Detroit. Cousins kind of like the opposite, where you know the off-scripted plays necessarily like fall apart. Where I think O'Connell, to me at least, I think O'Connell's willing to work with anybody. You know, I think he's the type of guy where it's like, it was kind of like McVay early on with Goff. Where like, oh yeah, I got Jared Goff, I could get the best out of Goff. And then he gets Stafford, and Stafford, it just makes it easier. So, but yeah, I'm excited to see like what the future holds. I mean, all indications still say that Cousins is going to be the quarterback in 2022. I think the biggest question going forward is he going to be the quarterback beyond that? Because they might use this as like a year just to really evaluate things. And reports came out that Cousins and his agent could force the Vikings' hand by not restructuring, not renegotiating. Yeah. Where it's either you're going to eat this $45 million cap hit or you're going to trade my client. So if it's one or the other, I mean, they might just use this year to evaluate the roster and kind of just let it roll out, not necessarily make a lot of impact moves, and just run it back and kind of study of how this team is and where they should go going forward. Because then if Cousins leaves, you get a third-round compensatory pick if he leaves. So it's like if you're not getting a third-round pick for that contract right now, you might as well just keep him.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. And with all the question marks around the NFL, with, you know, a lot of teams are looking for quarterbacks right now. I don't know if they're really interested in Kirk Cousins or anything like that, but in all honesty, I think he can at least get a second-round pick for him right now. I mean, his trade value is as high as it's ever going to be. A team that's looking to win now, like we talked about Cleveland yesterday, you know, that's a possibility.
Denver is the one.
It's interesting. Yeah, Denver. Yeah, we both keep going back to Cleveland because it just makes the most sense. Honestly, it makes the most sense. But yeah, Kevin O'Connell's presser yesterday, everything, you know, from top to bottom was fantastic about it. But we are going to move on to some questions here we had today. We had some folks on Twitter sent us out some questions, so we wanted to just, you know, talk about those a little bit. We had a lot of good questions. I picked about 4 or 5. There's about 20 of them, but obviously we're not going to go through 20 questions in a day. But thank you for all that sent questions in. The first one is from Jay Owlett34 on Twitter. He said, if you had your choice of any of the free agents in this class that make the most logical sense for us, who would they be? What do you think, Thomas?
My heart tells me, like Brandon Sheriff would be the one, but that's not really realistic because of his price tag.
Yeah.
Even though he wants to play for the Vikings, apparently, according to Phil Mackey. Yeah. He got a DM saying that he wants to play for the Chiefs or the Vikings. He wants to stay close to home, but just financially, I can't see how it makes sense. So I went with the more realistic route, and I think it's the most important position on their offensive line, and that's the center position. Ryan Jensen, the center from the Buccaneers, he's 30, going to be 31 years old. Vikings have a young offensive line. They need to solidify that with a veteran. You go guys like Austin Corbett and younger guys, but I think you need that veteran right in the middle, kind of like a Jason Kelsey with Philadelphia from a few years back, where you just need that guy kind of to command the rest of the team. He's won a Super Bowl with the Bucs. He's never missed a game in Tampa Bay. He had a PFF grade of 70.3, so you take the grain of salt, but I mean, anything is better than Garrett Bradbury at this point. But you just need to solidify the offensive line, and I really believe in Wyatt Davis. I think he's going to be able to step in and be that right guard. He's been working with an offensive line guru down in Texas, I believe, and you just got to figure that center position because that's the most difficult position to really identify in the draft process, which is why I was not a fan of Bradbury at the time. Take Bradbury simply because I don't take a center in the first round. I feel like you could figure that in the third, fourth round area, or you could find one on the open market. Jensen just seems like the most realistic possibility. According to Spotrac, he's got a contract projection of 3 years, $30 million. And I think $10 million for a top 10 center in football is pretty reasonable. And if they could lock him up for 3 or 4 years, he's kind of like that little missing piece on the offensive line that I think you just need. And I would be thrilled if they came away with Ryan Jensen in free agency, and then they could kind of focus the draft on the defensive side of the ball. They could go cornerback and edge rusher in like the first 2 rounds, knowing that you already have the center position resolved, and then Davis could potentially step in at right guard. And even whether you're heading towards a rebuild or you're ready to compete, Ryan Jensen makes sense for both areas.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I would show you my notes. I have 2 names circled, Brandon Sheriff and Ryan Jensen. and obviously, Sheriff's more of a pipe dream. I mean, you never know. You never know. It could happen. Obviously, the Vikings have a lot of, maneuvering with the cap to do in these next few weeks. But I think Ryan Jensen, you hit it on the head again. I think he would fit right on that offensive line. A veteran presence to go along with Christian Darrisaw, Ezra Cleveland, and then just to go with our maybe quarterback of the future or Kirk Cousins. We've had Garrett Bradbury in that spot for how long, and it's the experiment is over. We need to move on. And Mason Cole was okay, but he's a top tier backup, I think, in this league. But he's a backup. He can fill in for a game or two, but he's not your long-term situation or long-term answer at center. So if we go Ryan Jensen, you said sign him to a 3-4 year contract, I think he'd fit in perfectly, to be honest with you. And like you said, I'll worry about fixing the defense in the draft. We're moving to a 3-4 defense. Pick and choose the players you want in the draft and build that draft up from there. And obviously we got some veteran players on the defensive side of the football that are going to stick around. So it'd be a nice mix to go with building in the draft and having the veteran presence on defense. But I think we're only a piece or 2 away on offense to really explode. And center is one of those pieces. So I think they should really make that a priority in the draft. And like you said, if we do that, I think our offensive line can take that next step because we haven't had a good center for a long time. John Sullivan probably, to be honest with you, was our last above average center. So thanks for the question there, Justin. Our next one here is, which second-year player are you most excited to watch in 2022?
think I got to go Cam Bynum because I think he's going to start. And, when he did start a few of those games last year, Bynum really stood out. He's a fourth-round pick from Cal. I mean, he ended the year with 20 solo tackles. He had a sack. He had an interception. He had a PFF grade of 78.3. So he seems like the type of guy. And he's also built to be like a long-term safety. And I think they're going to need someone on a cheap deal if they want to keep Harrison Smith around until probably the end of his career. Because I think based off what O'Connell was saying in this press conference yesterday, he really emphasized how they really want to build this defense kind of around Harrison Smith. He's a guy you just keep around. And I think having him and Smith in the covering your safety area, you're pretty much good there for about 2 or 3 years minimum. And Bynum's just going to continue to learn. He could also play nickel. He's a very versatile safety who played cornerback at Cal and made the transition to safety in Minnesota because the Vikings drafted him as a corner, but they're like, we want to move him to safety. Right. So that tells me that for as well as he performed last year as a first-year safety, just think about what a whole offseason, learning the playbook, being able to learn from Harrison Smith, and really just take a step back to evaluate where he was last year. For him performing as well as he did as the first-time safety, let alone your first year in the NFL, but your first year at a new position, and he played that well, that just shows me that the potential is just as high as it could be for someone of his type of caliber. And I think Bynum is just the perfect guy out of all of last year's draft class because, Darisaw, it's kind of hard to evaluate an offensive lineman for his second year, and he already performed very well. Right. And their very next pick was Kellen Mond. We're not going to see Kellen Mond. Wyatt Davis is a name that could definitely be out there. But then when you look at the rest of the draft class, it wasn't Rick Spielman's finest draft class. Whether Zimmer neglected to play the guys or not, it didn't seem like that they hit a lot of big time guys. But Bynum is just the one who came out, and he really stood out the most, considering he was one of the more productive draft picks that they had last season. And he's likely going to be the replacement for Xavier Woods, because I'm not sure they're going to be able to I don't even know if they want to re-sign him, because he had a pretty solid year. So someone might overpay him and give him about a $4 to $5 million deal, while Bynum's going to be making $700K, maybe under $1 million. So for me, Bynum is the most exciting guy that I think could really make a huge impact in 2022.
Yeah, I agree, and I was ecstatic when they drafted him last year, and I thought we had a steal. I think it was the 4th or 5th round that we got him. And pre-draft, everyone was talking about how intelligent he was and how smart he was and how instinctual he was. And I thought it made a lot of sense moving him from corner to safety because he can kind of read offenses, and he's a good communicator, and he's just very intelligent for the position. So I thought it made a lot of sense to make that move. The one guy that I'm kind of looking forward to, and I know we got Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, but I'm looking for that second-year jump from Amir Smith-Marset. He towards the end of the year, he started making some plays, and that's because Adam Thielen was injured. He was getting more opportunity. But I'm just looking for that. We haven't had that deep threat that, in a long time. I know Justin Jefferson can take the top off of defenses, but, there's going to be a lot of focus on Justin Jefferson. So if we can get that intermediate area covered in the route trees, and we can send Amir Smith-Marset deep, I think he's going to have some opportunities to make some big plays. And he did that versus Chicago final game of the year. He had 3 catches, 103 yards. So that's about 34 yards a catch and a touchdown. So if he can have a game every now and then like that, I think it's going to do a lot for our offense. And the guy's just fast. He's only 21 years old, actually. So, he's got a lot of room to grow. And it all depends on, Kevin's going to run that 11 personnel. So he's going to get more opportunities than he did last year. Mix him in. And like I said before, I know we got Justin Jefferson, Thielen, and Osborne. But I think he's going to get more opportunities this year. And, the Rams offense like to take a lot of shots this year. So they're going to use him for that area alone. But like you said, the draft class wasn't Rick Spielman's strongest last year. But like you said, maybe it was Zimmer just neglecting to play these guys because he's stubborn. So, there could be some guys looking to take some leaps, like you said, Wyatt Davis. We got 2 defensive ends that we took in the mid rounds, Patrick Jones, Janarius Robinson, athletic guys, kind of fit that Daniil Hunter mold. So are those guys going to make the leap? And then Chaz Surratt, linebacker, he didn't get any playing time last year, and I know he's very raw, but he's very athletic. So, he could fit in that 3-4 defense pretty well. So it's going to be interesting to see what those guys contribute next year. All right, this next question comes from I Walk Vike Selt, long name. We talked about this yesterday a little bit, Tom, and it's a question that is very intriguing. They asked, should we shop Dalvin Cook? And if yes, what's a realistic trade idea if that could happen?
Yeah, we did talk about this a little bit yesterday. Should they shop him? No. But should they listen to offers if they're approached by them? Yes. And 2 teams that really come across from as a realistic trade is the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. It's no secret that Buffalo's searching for a running back. They're going to be on the open market, or they're going to do it via trade. I've heard Saquon Barkley could be connected to them. That's been like the worst kept secret around the league, is simply just because Buffalo is ready to win now. Barkley, they might move on from him in New York with Dable, who's very pass happy. So I would say Buffalo is who you should try, because I think they would overpay compared to most teams, because they're a Dalvin Cook away from like probably taking down the Kansas City Chiefs. Simply just they need to slow down the clock. And I think if I don't know if you could get a first round pick for him, even if it's a late first for Buffalo, but I would say a more realistic trade path would be their second round pick this year, which is 57th overall, and a second next year. If you could get 2 second round picks for Dalvin Cook, I think that could justify trading him away, simply because you have Alexander Mattison and Kene Wangu in the backfield who are more than capable of taking income and probably having Dalvin Cook's workload, but not as many tolls on their hits on their body. And then Miami, Dalvin's got to go home. Send him home. He wants to eventually probably play for Miami. That's where he's from. We talked about pick 50 and then a 4th round pick this year, 120. The Vikings don't have a 4th round pick, so if you get an extra second and a 4th this year, I think that's a pretty fair value trade for Dalvin Cook, who's never had a healthy season. He's blown his knee out twice. I would try for pick 29 if Miami's desperate. Like Dalvin Cook straight up for pick 29, I'd be like, done deal. So those are the 2 teams that probably jump out the most. But yeah, try for the first round pick, someone like Buffalo or Miami if you can. If not, settle for the 2 seconds from Buffalo or Miami for a 2nd and 4th. Because the only thing is you're not freeing up that much money this year. You will have some dead cap, so it's got to be a pick that's fairly compensationable, where you're very comfortable taking it. And I think 2 seconds easily. A 2nd and 4th from Miami, maybe question it a little bit.
Yep.
But I still think that alone still justifies the pick, because you could even take a running back with one of those 2nd round picks, like an Isaiah Spiller, Breece Hall, and even take Dalvin's brother later on in the 3rd or 4th round, James Cook, where if you watch his Georgia tape, it looks like Dalvin Cook. They have the same
crazy.
Number, same hair. I mean, it was just everything. Where his film, I'm like, that's Dalvin Cook from Florida State. So, I mean, the running back class this year is deeper compared to past years. It's just not top heavy. It's more so about depth. But yeah, I mean, I think Buffalo, Miami, those are the 2 teams that if they call, you at least listen.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, I mean, we're not going to look to actively shop Dalvin Cook. That doesn't really make any sense because obviously if you're looking to shop him, I don't think his trade value would be as high. If someone that's interested is going to come and, ask, is Dalvin available? I think if someone reaches out to us And like you said, Miami could, Buffalo could. There's a few teams that maybe would. And if we get good draft compensation for it, why not? And I think it all kind of depends on what we do with Kirk Cousins as well, if we're going to run it back again in 2022. Because if our plan is to run it back, I think Dalvin Cook is here because he's a big part of that puzzle. So if we look to run it back, keep Kirk Cousins around, add some pieces to the defense, Dalvin's going to be here. Because if we do that, we're looking to compete in 2022. Make a playoff push, and you never know, maybe try to make some noise in the playoffs. But if it is a retool, moving Kirk Cousins off, moving some older guys off of the defense, you never know. You're looking to retool, looking to rebuild a little bit, create cap room, build in the draft, and then I think it makes a lot more sense, for sure. But the next question, speaking of the draft. This is from Justin Thielen 1. Will Kwesi focus on building through the draft or free agency this year? What's your take on that, Tom?
I think if the only way we could really evaluate Kwesi is from his time in Cleveland under Andrew Berry, and they've done good work there. I have the past 2 draft classes here of when Kwesi was in Cleveland, and in the 2020 draft, the Browns, Kwesi and Andrew Berry, they took Jedrick Willis, great pick, round 1. Safety Grant Delpit, round 2. Jordan Elliott, defensive tackle, round 3. Linebacker Jacob Phillips, round 3. Then they found Harrison Bryan late. And they found Donovan Peoples-Jones, who a lot of people know. They found him in the 6th round. And then in the 2021 draft, they found Greg Newsome, Jeremiah Owosu Koromoa. He was supposed to be a first-round pick. He had some injury concerns, so he fell to the 2nd round to them. 2 great picks. Speedster Anthony Schwartz. That's a guy where if you go on YouTube, you could find a clip of Kwesi talking about Schwartz and his speed and of how they simply can just plug him into the offense and use him as a weapon. And then Demetric Felton. He came. He played late after the Chubb and Hunt injuries. But so far, those are 2 back-to-back solid draft classes to add depth. Now we go to free agency. When I did my research for free agency, Andrew Berry, Kwesi, and the Browns, they like to swing big about one guy, like about 1 or 2 guys they'll swing big for, and then they'll find those like value guys, 1 year, $4 million deals. In 2020, they signed Austin Hooper, 4 years, $44 million. Then they signed Jack Conklin, 3 years, $42 million, filled 2 huge holes. And then in the 2021 is where they really swung big again. John Johnson, safety from the Rams. Troy Hill, nickel cornerback from the Rams. Then Jadeveon Clowney late, good value, 1 year, $8 million. So I think when you're evaluating the approach, the Vikings are kind of strap-capped right now, so you don't really know what they're going to do because they have about 3 or 4 weeks to clear about $30 million in cap space. So there's going to be moves that are made. You need to at least be under the cap by March 16th. And then you need another $8 to $10 million for the draft. So there's a lot of moves that are going to be made, so I don't know if they're going to go like big fish hunting. I think for the very first year, Kwesi's going to be looking simply build through the draft, find good value in free agency, such as a Brian Allen, center from the Rams, where he'll be a little cheap. Maybe they could find like a receiver. Maybe they could bring Patrick Peterson back. It's going to be very small, so I would lower the expectations. No, unless Kirk's moved. Because if Kirk's moved, then you could free up that money. That opens everything up. Or even Danielle Hunter, which I can't see them moving on from Danielle Hunter, knowing this defense has little to no depth as it does. But I think it's all about finding the value for this year. A lot of 1-year deals where you're not like locked in long term. Next year they'll have $60+ million in cap space, I think, unless they re-sign Cousins. But that next year is when I think you'll start to see what kind of GM Kwesi is. Because then you'll have cap space to work with. You'll have his second draft. He'll have his own scouts picked out in the front office. Everything. Yep. So this first year, I think you kind of just have to just evaluate and just don't expect much unless you see a lot of moves such as Hunter gone, Cousins gone. Then you know they're gonna pick their own guys. But with little to no cap space, it seems like going through the draft is the way to go right now in Kwesi's spot as a first-year GM and no cap space to work with. I would say build through the draft and find value on like maybe the third wave of free agency. That maybe go big after like a Ryan Jensen, like that, like Ryan Jensen. That would be like a big move for them.
Yeah.
Not more other teams. It's not that big, but for the Vikings, that would be their big move because they're just so cap strapped right now. So yeah, I would say build through the draft right now. As we get more cap space going forward, expect at least a big swing or two on a yearly basis.
Yep, I totally agree, and I think we're gonna be bargain shopping this year in the free agency, especially with the limited cap space. And I think, Kwesi, I think he's gonna build through the draft this year, try to gain some draft picks, and I think, I know he doesn't like to be called this, but those analytical guys, I think they really like the draft. They like the combine. They like to look through those things. So I think Kwesi's a big draft guy, but it's going to be exciting to watch. Another aspect this offseason to watch, and it all depends on what we do with those players with the big cap hits this year. Because if we do clear cap space, they're probably going to be looking to be more active in free agency, like you said. So just keep an eye on that. But at this point, I think we both agree he's going to be looking to build through the draft a little bit more this year. But down the line, it could change. When we got more cap space, like you said, maybe a home run hit or two, and then kind of fill out the roster with some value guys. One more question here, Tom, and this is a little bit of a bonus question. This is from Carly_2 on Twitter. What is your top 5 frozen pizzas? I think 7th Avenue is okay for a frozen pizza. Aldi's, I think, is better. Fun fact, I haven't had 7th Avenue or Aldi's pizza.
You neither.
No, you either.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I even know 5 frozen pizza brands, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I agree. Frozen pizza, like here and there, but, it's not something I go to the store for.
Right.
But, maybe Totino's Party Pizza. That's like a really solid one. They're like $1.99. You could heat them up or, put them in an air fryer. I would say Totino's, like, that's probably the one I go to. Then you got like DiGiorno's. But, I'm not a big, like, frozen pizza guy. But if I had to pick at least one that I have had before, the Totino's Party Pizza is good value.
Yeah. And usually I wasn't big on frozen pizzas, but now that I have 2 kids that like to eat, it's something easy to throw in the oven.
Yep.
Here you go, have some pizza, and kids love pizza, obviously. And I'm not sure if this is more of a Midwest thing, but we are big-time Red Baron people. I don't know if you've had Red Baron pizza before.
I've heard of it.
We have Red Baron around the house all the time. And then another brand was, like, a lot of fundraisers do this kind of pizza, Hedgie's Pizza. I don't know if you've heard of Hedgie's before. But both of those pizzas are really, really solid. And like you said, I don't even know if I know 5 brands. Obviously, there's like Jack's and Tony's, but that's like, I think, more bottom tier. I'll have those every now and then. But Red Baron and Hedgie's are our go-tos here. And Totino's, you can't go wrong there either. Those party ones are really good as well. But yeah, did you want to add anything more to the conversation at all, Tom? Anything about the questions we had? Anything about Kevin O'Connell? Obviously, there's a lot to talk about today, but there's gonna be a lot to talk about in the future too. There's a lot coming yet.
No, honestly, I could go on and on about Kevin O'Connell and how excited I am, but just maybe one last takeaway from the press conference. I don't know if you noticed this. He started talking about Anthony Barr, Eric Hendricks, Harrison Smith. But one name I did not hear was Danielle Hunter. And that's what I thought was very strange.
Yep.
Because he's the type of guy that you want to, as your highest paid defender and the most consistent guy. He's not the most durable as of late, but when he's on the field, he gets a sack every game. That's, he had 6 sacks last year in 6 games. So, that time tells me a lot. Like, I wonder if they will listen to offers because I wonder if behind the scenes Hunter's maybe not too thrilled that they didn't keep Andre Patterson, considering that Patterson did not want to go to the Giants. He just took the job because it was only offered. The Vikings did not want to bring him back. So, to me, that kind of, I mean, I just wonder behind the scenes if Hunter is a little peed off kind of thing, where he's just very upset. One, his contract it's already been an issue for 2 years now. And he just lost, like, his father figure in the league. Like, him and Patterson are tight. Where Patterson knew more what was going on with Hunter last year when he wasn't, like, showing up right away and before the injury and everything than the actual, like, Vikings organization did. So, if he does, seem upset behind the scenes and maybe they've already decided to move on and just listen to offers, the Giants are a clear name to kind of take a look at. They need an edge rusher more than anything. And they got 2 top 10 picks. You could package Hunter in 12 for pick 7 and a lot more. But, it's just like a situation to keep an eye on just because I thought that was a little concerning that your new head coach does. That's like McVay not talking about, like, Aaron Donald or something. It's just, why are you not talking about your premier future Hall of Fame edge rusher of a guy you want to build around when you're willing to build around a 33-year-old safety, but not a 27-year-old pass rusher entering his prime? Like, I just thought that was concerning to me.
Yeah, it's a very interesting nugget. Yeah, I thought of that right away too because he said, we got these stars at every level of the defense, and he started out with Harrison Smith, then Eric Kendricks, and they're like, okay, he's going to say Danielle Hunter next, and then he started talking about Anthony Barr. I'm like, okay. Anthony Barr is not even really under contract with the Vikings, and you're talking over him over, like you said, a superstar, probably our second best player behind Justin Jefferson, or definitely our best player on defense when healthy. So, yeah, it's interesting, and we can take all these pieces from the contract, talking about Kirk Cousins, and then Kwesi kind of being like shying away from that question from Chris Thomason about Kirk Cousins. And then, obviously, Kevin O'Connell not talking about Danielle Hunter. It's a lot of interesting tidbits from that presser. But like we've always been saying, this offseason is going to be interesting. A lot of new information is going to be coming out down the road, and they got decisions to make in these next few weeks. So, Tom, again, thank you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. It was a great episode. Thanks for the questions today. We will see you in the next one, hopefully to get another episode out next week. Tom, thanks for joining.
Yeah, no problem.